Wake up. The sound still echoes, a single strike of wood against wood. Yet it wasn't just a gavel. It was thunder rolling through every corridor of their lies. That sound didn't just end a case. It ended their comfort. It cracked the mask of power they wore, and the silence that followed was louder than any cheer. They thought they had you locked, buried, caged in a narrative they built brick by brick, with whispers, rumors, false smiles, staged confidence. They were so sure of themselves, parading as if the world belonged to them. And they thought you were finished. They laughed at your name in secret group chats. They rehearsed your downfall like a script. They whispered, "This one won't rise again." But today, that script burned. Today, the very stage they mocked you on collapsed under their feet. That verdict was more than words. It was a blade cutting through years of poison. It was a mirror shoved in their faces, forcing them to confront the truth they tried to bury. You weren't guilty. You weren't small. You weren't weak. You were patient, silent, steady, gathering weight like a storm beyond the horizon. And when the world finally looked, it didn't see the caricature they painted. It saw the truth. It saw you. They underestimated silence. They misread restraint. They thought because you didn't shout, you were powerless. Because you didn't fight dirty, you were defenseless. But silence has gravity. Patience has venom. And when judgment finally came, it exposed everything. Their smirks cracked. Their allies shrank. Their influence evaporated like mist under a scorching sun. Imagine their faces, frozen in disbelief, eyes darting, breath caught. They rehearsed victory. Instead, they swallowed humiliation. And you didn't need to clap. You didn't need to scream. The world did it for you. Your name was cleared. Not in whispers, not in shadows, but in a voice so loud it made nations lean in. Every lie they told became evidence against them. Every sneer became proof of their fear. And now, as the echo of that gavel fades, something irreversible begins. The transfer of weight. Their empire trembles. Your presence expands. They don't admit it out loud, but deep inside, they know. The verdict didn't just absolve you. It condemned them. And that's only the beginning. They built a theater around your name. Curtains of gossip, scripts of slander, rehearsed lines of fake concern disguised as moral authority. They weren't just enemies. They were actors playing confidence. Behind closed doors, they smirked and sharpened their tongues, convinced they were untouchable. They thought the room belonged to them, that every eye would follow their lead, that their voices wrote reality. But today, the lights shifted. Today, the spotlight turned, and it burned them where they stood. See, the verdict wasn't just judgment, it was exposure. Every mask they wore cracked in the same second. The self-proclaimed mentors, the clever manipulators, the quiet snakes whispering in corners, they all stood naked under truth's glare. They had convinced themselves they were architects, that they built the structure of perception itself. But verdicts don't bow to whispers. Truth doesn't negotiate with gossip. And when that truth was spoken, their architecture collapsed like glass towers in an earthquake. Think about it. They strutted like emperors. They rehearsed speeches in their heads about how you were done, how your story was over, how they had buried you beneath their influence. They thought your silence was defeat. They thought your restraint was surrender. But the moment judgment had shattered their illusion, the laughter they weaponized turned against them. They didn't just lose, they were revealed. Their arrogance wasn't armor, it was evidence. Their confidence wasn't strength, it was noise. And when the noise stopped, so did their power. The courtroom, the boardroom, the back room, it all froze. The verdict carved through their narrative like a hot blade through wax. All their years of whispers turned into echoes no one respected anymore. The world finally saw the mechanics of their theater. They weren't powerful. They were desperate. They weren't masterminds. They were parasites living off a lie. And that lie disintegrated the moment truth was spoken out loud. Now look at them, fidgeting in seats they once occupied like thrones, whispering to each other, scrambling for excuses, their eyes scanning the room for allies, finding only shadows. Because no one wants to stand beside a collapsing empire. The influence they built so carefully now works against them. Every person who once nodded along is reconsidering, retracting, retreating. Because loyalty to a lie is suicide once the lie is exposed, and exposure is permanent. You can't rewind the sound of a gavel. You can't unhear a verdict. You can't unsee the collapse of arrogance. That's what eats them alive tonight. Not just that they lost, but that they were seen losing. Publicly, completely, irreversibly. And you didn't lift a finger. You didn't swing a blade. You didn't raise your voice. You let time and truth do what noise never could. And now the same mouths that mocked your name are stuttering, choking, tripping over silence they can't escape. They're haunted by the memory of their own performance. A play that turned into their confession, and deep down, they know this wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. They thought silence meant weakness. They mistook your stillness for surrender, your patience for fear, your refusal to argue for inability. But silence isn't absence. Silence is calculation. It's the art of holding ground without wasting energy. It's the weight of a storm gathering out of sight. While they filled rooms with noise, you studied. While they sharpened their tongues, you sharpened your awareness. While they mocked you, you memorized their patterns. And when the moment came, your silence struck harder than 1,000 speeches. Understand this, your silence was never passive. It was an instrument. Every time you refused to bite back, you weren't losing. You were watching. You were cataloging the cracks in their armor, the tremble behind their jokes, the desperation behind their gossip. You saw what they didn't want seen. You noted how they relied on noise to mask insecurity. You measured how their confidence collapsed the second they weren't being watched. And you realized something they never did. Noise burns fast, but silence burns permanent. The verdict proved it. When truth landed, you didn't need to defend yourself. Your records spoke louder than their rehearsed lies. Your patience became proof. Their arrogance became evidence. All their noise was exposed as hollow when measured against your quiet resilience. And that's why the silence they once mocked now terrifies them. Because silence means you're not playing their game. Silence means you're waiting for your move. Silence means inevitability is on your side. Picture the look in their eyes when the judgment was read. Panic, confusion, disbelief. They expected you to beg for recognition. Instead, you stood there calm, unshaken, letting reality itself argue in your favor. That calmness destroyed them more than any outburst could, because they realized, too late, that your silence was never submission. It was strategy. And here's the part that makes them crumble at night. Silence doesn't end when words arrive. It lingers, it echoes. The memory of how calm you stayed haunts them more than the verdict itself. Because anyone can fight loud, few can wait quiet. Few can weaponize patience. Few can hold fire in their chest and release it only when the timing is perfect. You did, and that precision cut deeper than rage ever could. They will never admit it, but the silence they once mocked now replays in their heads as evidence of their own blindness. They underestimated the quiet one. They underestimated the patience that built momentum. They underestimated the storm disguised as stillness. And now, every time they hear your name, they don't think of weakness anymore. They think of the silence that dismantled them. Your silence wasn't emptiness. It was a verdict waiting to be delivered. And when it came, it rearranged the world. Confidence is fragile when it's built on illusion. They strutted into rooms puffed up by lies, swollen with arrogance, convinced that their shadows were empires. They rehearsed their laughter, sharpened their smirks, practiced their little victories in advance. They believed they had written the ending to your story, signed, sealed, stamped. But when the verdict struck, when the truth detonated like a flash bomb in the dark, their entire foundation split. Confidence turned to confusion. Swagger turned to stammer, and those once proud voices cracked into silence. Watch carefully how the collapse works. First comes the freeze, the shock in their faces, when reality does not match the script they rehearsed. Then comes the scramble, the darting eyes, the whispered excuses, the shifting blame, and finally comes the unraveling, the way their shoulders sag, the way their tone softens, the way their certainty melts into fear. This isn't just loss, it's exposure. It's the realization that their power was never power at all. It was borrowed, stolen, propped up by perception, and once perception turned, they had nothing left. Do you understand the humiliation? They didn't just lose in private, they lost publicly. In the same places they once paraded your name like a trophy of mockery. They collapsed in the very theater they built to destroy you. Imagine it, their allies staring, their supposed friends pulling back, their networks dissolving in real time. One verdict, one truth, and suddenly the empire they bragged about is nothing but rubble at their feet. And you didn't need to twist the knife. The silence did it for you. The judgment did it for you. Their own arrogance did it for you. They fell into a trap they built with their own hands. Every insult, every rumor, every smirk, they wove their own noose out of it. And the moment truth arrived, they hung themselves with it. Confidence collapses fastest when it's exposed as counterfeit. That's why they're so quiet now. That's why their laughter no longer carries. That's why their words sound brittle, hollow, easily broken. Because deep down, they know the truth. They were never strong. They were never dominant. They were never untouchable. They were just loud, and now, stripped of noise, they are nothing. The collapse isn't temporary, it's permanent. Once the world sees through the illusion, it can never be unseen. Once the masks are ripped off, they can't be worn again without mockery. They are trapped in the memory of their own fall, cursed to relive the moment their confidence cracked in front of everyone. And here's the cruelest part. Their collapse fuels your rise. Every ounce of power they lose transfers to you. Every person who abandons them drifts closer to your orbit. Their downfall isn't just an ending, it's your acceleration. That's why they look over their shoulders now. That's why they flinch when your name is mentioned. That's why they whisper in smaller, quieter tones, afraid of being heard. Their collapse isn't just in their power, it's in their posture, it's in their bones, and no verdict can undo that. Vindication isn't quiet. It doesn't slip in through back doors or whisper its way into existence. No, when vindication arrives, it explodes into the room like sunlight after a storm, burning away every shadow, forcing every eye to witness what can no longer be denied. That's what happened to you. This wasn't a secret clearing of your name, hidden away in some forgotten corner. This was public, loud, undeniable. The very stage where they paraded your supposed downfall became the stage of your triumph. The theater they built to humiliate you became the arena where truth crowned you. Think of their humiliation. They had trained people to sneer at your name, to roll their eyes, to dismiss you without thought. They had fed poison into conversations, shaping perception with every lie. But when the verdict fell, all those perceptions flipped. The very crowd that once doubted you now watched with widened eyes. The same mouths that once mocked were forced to stay shut, silenced not by fear but by exposure. They couldn't laugh anymore, not when truth had landed like a hammer, not when every smirk turned into evidence of their blindness. And you didn't need to announce yourself. You didn't need to scream, "I told you so." Vindication doesn't beg for applause, it demands it. The energy shifted on its own. Rooms that once ignored you now pause when you enter. Conversations that once dismissed you now circle back to your name. Spoken with hesitation, with respect, with the kind of awe that only comes after witnessing collapse. You became the subject they can't escape, the reminder they can't erase. Vindication hurts the guilty more than it heals the innocent, because now they must live with the memory of how wrong they were. They must carry the shame of every word they threw at you, every joke, every smear, every plot. And the worst part, they can't rewrite it. The verdict is permanent. The humiliation is permanent. Their fall is permanent. The world saw it. The world remembers it. Vindication isn't just about your name being cleared. It's about their names being stained. It's about their reputations cracking under the weight of their own lies. It's about allies abandoning them because no one wants to be tied to failure. And that's exactly what they've become. A cautionary tale of arrogance exposed. Now every step you take carries weight. Every silence you hold carries power. Every glance you give unsettles them because they remember how the room shifted, how the energy flipped, how the world that once doubted you now bends in your direction. That's what vindication feels like. Not revenge, not rage, but a correction so complete, so undeniable, it rewrites the balance of power. So let them shuffle, let them scramble, let them pretend they didn't once laugh at your name. The truth doesn't need their acknowledgement. The verdict already carved the truth into stone. And stone doesn't bend. You are vindicated publicly, permanently, and they are branded with their own. Collapse, vindication, was enough to silence their mouths. But fate wasn't finished, because when the dust settles after truth, something bigger always follows. Recognition, and not from the ones who once doubted you. Not from the crowd that once clapped for your enemies. No, recognition comes from those who matter. The kind of figures they worshipped, the kind of names they quoted, the kind of power they bowed to in secret. And now, those very forces are nodding in your direction. Understand what that does to them. It's one thing for you to rise. It's another for power itself to lean your way. The very people they tried to impress now step closer to you. The ones they begged for approval now glance past them, eyes locked on you. That's when the betrayal cuts deepest. Not betrayal by you, but betrayal by the system they thought belonged to them. They thought influence was theirs to control, allies theirs to command. But power respects truth, not noise, and the truth has chosen you. Look at the shift happening. Once your enemies walked into rooms certain that every chair belonged to them. Now those chairs swivel toward you. Once they were the loudest voice in the circle. Now the circle waits for yours. Once they used borrowed authority as armor. Now authority itself refuses to shield them. Recognition doesn't ask permission. It arrives like a storm, undeniable, uncontainable, bending every structure around it. And here's the irony. You didn't chase it. You didn't beg for it. You didn't craft fake alliances to buy it. You stood silent, patient, unshaken. And in that stillness, true power noticed. Because real influence recognizes resilience. Real authority recognizes endurance. Real legends recognize the spark of another. That's why the ones they worship now look at you as the mirror they didn't expect to see. Your enemies feel it like a knife. They watch the figures they once bragged about. Leaders, titans, voices with reach shift their tone when speaking about you. They hear the respect creeping into conversations. They feel the spotlight moving, not because you demanded it, but because truth dragged it toward you. That's what terrifies them the most. They can fight lies with more lies, but they can't fight recognition. They can't silence nods. They can't erase respect once it's stamped by power greater than theirs. And you don't need to celebrate. Recognition isn't for cheering. It's for absorbing. It's for understanding that the game has tilted, that the same weight they used to hold over you now crushes them. Because when someone powerful leans in your direction, it's not charity. It's acknowledgement. It's validation. It's destiny whispering, you weren't just cleared. You were crowned, so let them tremble in their shrinking circles. Let them choke on the silence that replaced their noise. The very powers they once paraded as shields have turned into mirrors reflecting your rise. Recognition isn't given lightly, and now it belongs to you. Recognition is sweet for you, but for them it's poison, because nothing infects faster than doubt. Doubt is a parasite that feeds on their pride, and after the verdict, after the shift in power, doubt is all they taste. They walk into rooms they once owned and suddenly feel eyes, burning holes in their backs. Every silence feels loaded, every laugh feels suspicious, every glance between allies looks like betrayal in disguise. They don't trust each other anymore. They don't even trust themselves. This is what paranoia does. It corrodes from within. They used to mock you with ease, but now every word they speak trembles. Because what if someone carries it back to you? What if someone secretly stands for you? What if the person they confide in is no longer theirs, but yours? Their empire doesn't crumble with explosions. It collapses with whispers, with suspicion, with fear that the knife is already at their throat. And the best part, you didn't need to plant it. Truth did. Recognition did. The verdict did. Imagine their nights now, awake at 3 a.m., replaying the moment the gavel struck, haunted by the echo that will never leave their ears, checking their phones, watching conversations dry up, watching followers vanish, allies go silent, doors that once opened now stay shut. They scroll, they stalk, they listen, desperate for some reassurance that they still matter. But reassurance doesn't come. Instead, silence suffocates them. Silence they once mocked is now their executioner. And here's where the paranoia gets brutal. They don't know who's still loyal. Every person in their circle looks like a traitor, waiting to flip. Every handshake feels cold. Every smile feels fake. They live in a prison of their own creation, where every corner holds a mirror reflecting weakness. The fear doesn't just haunt them, it isolates them. And isolation, for people who once thrived on noise, is a slow, agonizing death. You don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to say a word. They're destroying themselves. The paranoia spreads like wildfire, faster than any rumor they ever built about you. They thought they could bury you with whispers. Now whispers bury them. They thought they could humiliate you in public. Now every public glance humiliates them. They thought they could control the narrative. Now the narrative controls them. Paranoia is the tax of liars, and right now, they're paying in full. And you rise clearer, calmer, untouchable, while they tremble at shadows. You don't chase them, they chase their own fear. You don't accuse them, they accuse themselves. Because the verdict didn't just clear your name, it rewired their minds. And now, they can't escape the feeling that every room is turning against them, that every silence belongs to you. That's not paranoia. That's justice with claws. Paranoia had them cornered, but destiny wasn't finished. Because when the weak scatter, when the guilty whisper, when the arrogant crumble, something always rises in the silence. Protection, not the kind you beg for, not the kind you hire, the kind that arrives unannounced, undeniable, unstoppable. That moment came for you. Out of nowhere, someone slammed their hand down, someone with weight in their voice, someone whose presence freezes rooms. They stood, and the air shifted. They didn't ask for silence, they commanded it. And suddenly, every enemy who once mocked you couldn't look up from the floor. Understand what that means. Vindication was the verdict. Recognition was the crown. But protection is the shield you never asked for. The army you never recruited. This isn't pity. This isn't charity. This isn't luck. This is loyalty in its rawest form. Cosmic, karmic, inevitable. Someone decided your name would not be dragged again. Someone decided your presence would not be questioned again. And in that moment, your enemies didn't just lose influence. They lost courage. They lost the right to touch your story ever again. Picture it. The same room where they once laughed, now quiet as a funeral. The same voices that once shouted, now reduced to whispers. The same hands that once pointed at you, now trembling in their laps. All because one figure, one voice, one undeniable force said, "Not this one." That was the moment your silence gained muscle. Your patience gained armor. Your vindication gained fire. You weren't just cleared, you were shielded. And shields don't fade, they grow. And here's the secret your enemies choke on at night. Protection multiplies. Once one person stood for you, others followed. Once one figure defended you, the silence spread. Now every room they walk into feels like a trap. Every sentence they start feels like it might end in exposure. Every fake smile feels like it's about to be split in half by loyalty. They can't predict. They are not just paranoid. They are hunted, not by you, but by truth, by presence, by karma, by protection. And you don't even need to know the names of those who defend you. You don't need to count allies, or track moves, or monitor whispers, because when the universe clears your name, when power recognizes your resilience, when protectors appear uninvited, you don't operate under their rules anymore. You don't live under their laws anymore. You don't answer to their systems anymore. You become the system. That's why their influence crumbled. That's why their empire rots. That's why their laughter is gone. Because the verdict wasn't the end. It was the ignition. It was the strike of flint against steel, and the fire it lit won't be contained. So wake up. Realize what happened. The world isn't watching them anymore. It's watching you. And this time, they can't bury your name, because your name is the verdict. The weapon, the fire, the law. Their reign is finished. Your rise has just begun.